Good morning, everyone. First, I have to say thank you to the Chairman, Managing Director of A-Star for inviting me here today. I'm really, really very glad to come back to Singapore. Singapore is the second home to me. I studied at the, no longer there, but you call it Chimes now. It's the CHIJ Victoria Street School. And I did I was a physicist in my undergraduate and then did my postgraduate, my doctoral training was at the NUS Business School, where much of the training was in mathematical economics. And so a lot of my work in the UK for the last 10 years in the UK has been around markets and understand how markets develop. I'm always very happy when I come back to Singapore because first, of course, you've got lovely food, wonderful people, and a weather that, believe me, many would die for if you're now in the UK, because we are having quite bleak weather right now. Before I go into my slides, I thought I'll introduce you to my institute, and given what Chairman Lim has just said, unfortunately, I don't know whether you can see this, but WMG is a department within the University of Warwick. I am director of an institute called the International Institute of Product and Service Innovation. It's such a mouthful, we decided to abbreviate it to IPSI. A lot of our work deals with engineering technologies, so most of the research are on the left-hand side. There is a big stream of research. Right in the center, I've marked it as orange. It's a particular research area that I'm the lead of called business transformation. IPSI looks very much at innovation mechanisms and engagement, but in terms of business transformation, a lot of what we look at is disruptive technology and markets of the future. When I was 6 years in a business school, got a bit restless, and while business schools do really, really excellent work, I decided I wanted to work in the future space. And I was just telling a colleague just now, unfortunately, in the academic domain, the future has no data. And when the future doesn't have data, it's kind of hard to publish. I have found no problem publishing mostly theoretical work and conceptual work, but I'll talk a little bit through to some of my work today. But IPSI has three major streams of innovation: digital application, experience-led engineering, polymer, and that's where we have all our 3D printers. But surrounding the three major technology spaces is my group, which has the business transformation research, but in the innovation side is actually big, which is business innovation group. And we bootstrap a lot of the technology for understanding future markets and future business model. And so I thought I'll start with that only because of, just to give a bit of context to what has been said. So today, actually, I wanted to talk to you about new business and economic models in the connected digital economy. Some of you call it the internet. It is the internet, but it also is connections in many other ways. And to talk a little bit about the research in this space and the implications for research in other spaces. My context, I'm incredibly online and connected. So if you can't find me, the problem is with you. All right, all the links are all there. We have had a world, and you know, you can actually blame a Scot for this, Adam Smith, who we inherited from understanding economics from the point of view of exchange. We have a world for about 500 years where our GDP is all about buying and selling. And that is the world before. We used to buy and sell stuff. And so the products became the domain of engineers, manufacturers, product designers, cars, tractors, equipment, fruit juices, cereal. And services sort of belong to management, IT, information systems, banking, hospitality, and healthcare. If you've not noticed it by now, all these lines between them are starting to blur. It's very hard now to tell what is a product and what is a service. It's very hard to tell where the boundary is between a thing and what the thing can offer in terms of its service. This has a huge implication for innovation because the human mind compartmentalizes things according to structures. We need structures because without structures, we don't know how to act. With structures, however, we act in a certain way. We think about solutions as what we recognize them to be. If somebody told you that the only way you can, or if you knew that the only way you can see what time it is when you wake up in the morning is through a bedside clock, then one day it just doesn't work and you realize your little iPhone actually gives you the time. The same outcome of knowing the time is now being fulfilled by a very different form of product. But because in our minds, products are solutions to our lives, and these solutions take a certain shape, like a car has 4 wheels. Like to go from point A to point B back in the 1700s was a horse. We naturally think that innovation must be a faster horse, a better alarm clock. It's the way our logic of our minds are institutionalized that creates a big issue with innovation. We institutionalize this logic, we institutionalize these solutions, and they stay as a logic in our head, and that makes it very difficult to break out. And when we start looking at certain forms of products materializing and dematerializing, banks are now becoming sort of things in your hands, and faxes that used to be a thing is now a service on the internet. You start to have to ask a question, not about what is a good and what is a service, but what is it for? In tomorrow's world, you will start to hear these buzzwords. We already hear it: cloud, everything in the cloud, Internet of Things, connected people, social media. These are some of the most disruptive forces at work, and they will continue to work in the next 5-10 years. Those of us who remember being online and on the internet for the first time back in the 80s and 90s, you haven't seen anything yet. It was just in a box. To come online today, you have to go into a box. It was a tablet, even now, or a phone or a computer. Everything is in the box. You immerse yourself in it. Well, that technology that is in the box is now threatening to jump out. And when it jumps out into the three-dimensional space, it directly interacts with something that connects us all, the social space. I like to think when a lot of people say we have the Internet of Things, but actually all our things are connected. The only problem is it's connected through us. And us isn't very visible. And most scientists like to put us exogenously outside the system, either calling it human factors or some kind of stochastic disturbances. Well, this little internet that is coming out of the box and getting everything connected is starting to change commerce. But why? What is happening? What is fundamentally changing? I mean, can we understand the change so that we can be ahead of it? And this is the nature of the research. My group, we're about 20 of us. We look at transformations and futures in terms of understanding what and why things happen. Yes, we believe there is a reason we can understand this, and I'm trying to give you an answer. Hopefully, it's not the only answer, but maybe it could give you some insights. Naturally, I'm biased. I see the world in terms of the value that we create. It's awful, because I've got friends who look at me and say, how can you see the world in terms of value? I said, because it's the sum of the thing, it's the thing that people don't talk about. Especially when we do research in new technologies. We don't look at our own lives. We don't realize that you can actually look at the way we create value with all our possession and all our services and products. And that's actually what life is. Life is a lot of creating value. Now, some people don't like that term value because it sounds like it's monetizing everything. No, I mean value etymologically from when it was first coined back in the days of philosophy. Value is something good. That's how we have the word values. Something good is something of value. It was Adam Smith who changed that word and made it not value, but worth. But if you go back in time and look at what value truly is, value has its origins from values. What is good about something? If we then think about value as exchange, which was, of course, our last 500 years, we used to think as manufacturers, as product sellers, as service providers, value as something that is worth. Well, let's call it what it is. It is worth. It's not value. Firms talk about added value as though it really adds, some kind of value or goodness. There is a reason for that, because very often if you add value or add worth, it actually creates value back into the organization, and that's good for the organization. But that was how we tend to look at value, as exchange. We buy something, we give money, we get something back. But if you think about what we bought, human beings don't define value as exchange. Human beings talk about value for money. Have you not noticed that the term value for money was very different from the term added value? That's because human beings look at value as the way we experience and consume something. It wasn't the buying of the car, it was the using of the car. It was even mentally or emotionally using, say it was on the driveway for status. It was the listening of music. It was a massage, something that constitute an experience. That's value to individuals. Now, if you look at this tension, this difference between what companies call value and what individuals call value, they are not the same. We take value from experience and use. Firms take value when they actually exchange it with you, a product. Previously, this was fine. There is no way you can use a bicycle if you didn't buy it. Or even, there was no way you could use a tablet if you didn't buy it, or eat cereal if you didn't buy it. So while it was not the same, they were aligned. You had to buy it in order to use it. And that is why the word value tends to be pervasive. But something is happening to a digital world when things can be converted to ones and zeros. You can now get some of the outcomes and the benefits based not on possession. So in the past, people would talk about the benefit of something. For example, if I sold you a DVD with an exercise DVD, a company will come up and say, look, this is going to help you lose weight. They sell you on the basis of the benefit of that DVD, forgetting completely that you have to buy it, pop it into a DVD player, have a TV, sort of stand in front of that TV for about 40 minutes every day in order to finally get that benefit. But you needed to own it to get that benefit. But you then inherit a world where they tell you this is the benefit and this is what you bought, but actually you didn't buy that. You bought possession. You bought the possession. Yes, possession led to use, but you bought possession. What if we could have use and experience without possession? If we could start achieving our outcomes without possessing stuff, would not that change a business model? Yes, it would. The case in point, of course, is music. It used to be you have to possess a CD, a vinyl, a tape. Without that possession, you cannot enjoy music. We all know today that's not true. I don't need to possess anything to listen to music being streamed on an iPhone. That business model of that industry has completely transformed. In fact, conversations this morning suggest that it's still being transformed. When a product can go through digital domains so quickly, its form, its function, and its function changes because the medium changes. The entire business model collapses. When a product that achieves certain outcome can achieve outcome with different forms, we now have to start to seriously think about the business model of achieving that outcome. We then start to see there are many, many inefficiencies in the market today. Where we buy, where we consume. So we buy beer at the supermarket. We consume at our living room, probably on Sunday at 3 o'clock when the football game is on. What we buy, what we consume, when we buy, when we consume, how we buy and how we consume. Because buy sits in markets, consumption sits in lives. The world as we knew it is actually quite inefficient market-wise. We have to buy almost everything before we consume. So I like it when people always say, we've got too many choices in our lives. Too many. Look at the supermarket. You've got too many choices of teas and coffees and t-shirts. Can I bet with you that when you woke up this morning, you only had one choice of tea, and that was the one you bought? We don't. We have many choices where markets are held. We don't have many choices in consumption. And this is the reason why the music business model went down. Because truly, we didn't want to possess, we just wanted to listen to music in context and on demand. And when the need is high, markets are like this, you know, they're like water coming down a mountain. It will find its way. And when we really want music in context and on demand, the form of CD became too inefficient to carry on. Other forms appear. Now, if I wanted to suddenly feel like listening to Black Sabbath, I could get it within probably 1 minute. In the past, it was a lot longer. If we then think about innovation and speed, you must think about where new markets are being formed, such that inefficiencies get reduced. Where will these new markets come from? So we've been writing a lot in this space about contextual markets, in context, on demand, making our minds wander a little. I mean, we're in the future space, right? What are the things we need in life that are terribly inefficient? Why do we have to buy everything out of context? And we do. That's the reason why you probably have at least 2 or 3 cereal boxes in your kitchen. Because you have to buy it out of context. You buy it so that you don't run out. Markets of the future, if possible, to be digitized, or at least partially, are going to be formed in context on demand as much as they can. So we start looking at then value in use, value in experience, value in what is it that we understand we're trying to get out of the product we want. And how do we understand that? Let me just give you an example. Has anybody in here got young children, babies, in a home? Anybody? Kids? There, we've got a few. So your little baby smiles for the first time. Oops, sorry. This is what happens when you're connected. And you want to take a picture. Do you take a picture with the mobile phone? You can see this is an old slide. It's an old mobile phone. Do you take a picture with a mobile phone or with your camera? What's the likelihood of the mobile phone? What's the likelihood of a camera? Lower. And the reason I say this is because we think about resources in context. That mobile phone is available. That means it's a resource in context. That one is not available. When it's not available, something's happening in my slide. You must understand value, therefore, in use is contextual. Whether it's your fault or the manufacturer's fault, it's not available, it can't be used, you get no value. When value is contextual and resources are contextual, things become value in context. So they enable resources to be there so that you can co-create in context for outcomes. So we tend to think about products and services and offerings in context as competency. Now, very many things are not competent. For example, a bandage is not very competent in context. Why? Because it cannot magically happen to appear in my hand when I've got a cut. It's not very competent because it's physically in a drawer somewhere. Now, a dictionary has become very competent of late because it's now available on your smartphone. So when we start thinking about forms of things, we think about where they are and what they are. Never mind who's responsible to get them to me. It may be just me. Maybe I brought bandages along, in which case I'm very good at making bandages competent. But the fact of the matter is, a competency of a product is, in context, is key to where the markets are. Two functionally the same cameras may not then have the same value in context. The difference is in its abilities, its competency, its capture ability, if you want to call it. I've got friends who love this ability, say. How good is the chair? It's not a chair, it's sit ability. It's not a pen, it's write ability. It's because the notion of its affordance and ability suggests us to break out of a mindset of a product and what it really offers to what it really can offer in context and on demand. When we start to think about context that changes the product, we start to go into the world of connected things. How does a product, or how does an offering become competent? Well, there are four ways of thinking about competency, 4 or 5 ways of thinking about competency. First, it would be more competent if it was visible. If I knew where it was, I'd know how to look for it. It's more confident if I could get at it, turn it on, turn it off. It's more competent if I could coordinate it with other things of my life. It is more competent if it is dynamically reconfigurable, cutting a little bandage to suit a wound. That's the most basic dynamic reconfigurability you can think of. I can think of anyway. And it'd be even more competent if you can integrate some of my life and my data. These are the sort of 5 aspects of the way we think about the future of the Internet of Things. When things morph and change to become connected things, these are the 5 major things that could happen to things. Why has this implication on research? Because it cuts right to the bottom to the way we think about how a thing is made. Whether it's fluids, whether it's material. Because now we are talking about an interaction between some more powerful dynamic technologies and their interactions with business models of the future. Business model, we typically define it as 3 parts. The value propositions, the offering, the customer in terms of his or her value creation, the experience, and also a way of capturing that value, monetizing, someone would call it, compensation, I would call it, transaction, some people would call it. The problem when you try to bring a product, let's say you think of the difficulty of Elastoplast making bandages. Because I like to think of the worst and most ridiculous thing you can think of. What if I made Elastoplast bandages more competent in context? That means that little bandage must know when you got a cut. It must know how you're going to do it and how you're going to use the bandage. What typically happens is you've got very high variety. Firms don't like high variety. High variety in the front end means it's not scalable. I cannot produce millions and millions because everybody is different. This lovely trade-off between scalability and high variety is an interesting one. Manufacturers will always tell you, the more you customize at the front end, the less you're able to scale. So incredible, great personalization like tailors and customization means we can't scale into the millions. You can't really make a lot of money with it. And that's how Nokia has looked at the world. Customized, tailored personalization of the phone, many, many different Nokias coming on. And then one day, a little phone that is identical to every one of its 3 billion phones in the world came in, and it was called the iPhone. The iPhone is identical you would agree with me. Every iPhone is the same, is manufactured the same. And yet every iPhone is personalized and every iPhone is unique. One company comes in and destroys the traditional trade-off between full scalability and full personalization. Why? Because it drew its boundary for personalization at a different place. And now it's worth billions. Are all products going that way? We'd like to think so. An iPhone is incomplete. We call an iPhone, a smartphone, an incomplete product. It's complete by personal data. It can be completed by 3D printing in some cases. It can be completed through many different resources. But in order to stay scalable and in order to start moving towards its billions, most products should be moving towards being a platform at some point. And this has huge implications on context and the way we experience things. When we start thinking about products being incomplete, we have to start thinking about modularity. And that cuts right into manufacturing, yes, but research even more. Because we traditionally think about modularity as maybe modular components, built for function, built for assembly, built for service, built for life. What if I said there was also a modularity to build for compensation, or what we call transaction? What if you only pay for half and only pay when you finished? What if you only pay for bandages when you had a cut? What is the business model like? What if you only paid for holes in walls and not drills? So talking to the drill supplier, they would say, that's awful. I'll never sell any drills. Because traditionally, research has shown the average number of holes in walls being drilled is about 3 in a year. And so they sell lots and lots of drills, but the average number of holes in walls are 3 a year. And the business model of that company, whether you're Bosch or anybody, will say, I can never sell holes in walls. Then, of course, you ask the company and says, do you know how many holes in walls that could have gone up, but people didn't have a drill? I'd say to you, probably millions and billions more, because the drill wasn't there. I'd even bet there are revenues against mine, potentially. But how do you get holes in walls rather than drills? You have to think about an outcome-based business model. You have to think about postponing what you make to finish up by the customer. I've worked with Rolls-Royce for 5 years now, and they are one of the most successful companies in looking at outcome-based business models, such as, and they get paid, single figure, a number for every hour an engine is in the air. Well, they don't pay for the service on the engine, just every hour the engine is in the air. It was quite a challenge during the ash crisis, trust me. Right? But business models can change. Wouldn't it be nice if we paid only for every washing we did on the laundry, or, different things, because it then incentivizes a different way of making. It starts to think about downstream postponement, the way we integrate personal data. We start to think of, do we have to tailor that many products? We have to start thinking of platforming. The future of connected and incomplete products, therefore, is the future of where is the transaction. I've only just talked about 2 boundaries of transaction. One, I give you this, you give me money. We have the possession boundary. The other one is a hole in the wall and you pay me money. Outcome-based boundary. Between the outcome and possession, I'm sure there must be plenty more. Something that allows a supply chain to come in, have you with your personal data, apply onto a product and have a personalized cup of tea or something, or personalized washing load. The form that comes in to serve future markets is going to depend on future things and future research. And the message I'd like to be able to convey today is, if you imagine a world where everything is a website, what can you do with websites today? You can reconfigure it, you can search it, you can do lots of stuff. Imagine everything is a website, because that's where we're going. How do you pay for that website? Because today's things are like the websites in the 1980s and 90s when the internet came on. You remember? They're like brochures. They're like, here we are, this is what we do, and we stop. That's today's things. What are tomorrow's things? They depend on a lot on technology, around materials, around fluids, around health, around food. What I'm suggesting is, when you have connected things and new markets happening in different places, what you get is the interaction between the research that we are doing today and business models of the future. So when you're doing some very, very interesting piece of research, you need to interrogate what business model is sitting in your mind in terms of the exploitation of the research, because that business model may currently not yet exist. And when it does, it cuts across. You know, just like glass and interaction interfaces, it's a huge jump in terms of, and promoted so much of material technologies. I've had to sit down with the good researchers in Cambridge because my boss says we want to get him, and he works in the area of graphene. And the researcher said to me, my work is at least 7 years away before it reaches applied. I said, yeah, but if you join my institute, it'll be 3 years away. And he says, why? I says, because we are under a lot of pressure. We work with JLR, automotive, and a lot of manufacturing and companies in industry who are under intense market pressure not to be disrupted and to win. And when you're under those kind of pressure, trust me, you go deep into any technology. An institute like myself, who can shorten its pathways to market, are the ones that will hopefully bring in some of the best talents and get them into the market and help our companies grow. So in terms of incomplete, oh dear, I seem to be repeating my slides. So I wanted to show you a little bit. How much time do I have? 10 minutes, okay. Well, I wanted to show you a little bit about how we sort of make things happen. I've been talking things in abstraction, like, you know, things are up in the air. But the reason I wanted to show you is one of the projects that we have, that I run. It's called the HAT, it's called the Hub of All Things. Again, it talks about the GDP and the economy and household purchase decision out of context. What I talk about, that markets will happen in context. This is a market that we want to engineer to happen. Because all that we buy is in the buying data, and all that we consume is private and you can't see, these markets can't happen, not yet. But because we now have connected people, personal data, and the Internet of Things, consumption data is now becoming more and more visible. So if we think about a world where if companies knew how we consume, really knew how we consume, could they personalize for future products better for us? Could we use some of our own consumption data to personalize current products? So this is the project called the HAT. You can see more of it at the hubofallthings.org. It's a £1.2 million Research Council project, 7 academic PI and co-Is, and 6 universities. I'm the principal investigator for this. It cuts across economics, design, computing, and business. It's the only project that we know of in the world where the outcome in about one year's time is a market platform at home that allows you to trade your personal data of consumption for buying products and services of the future. I'll take you through very quickly what this project is about, just to give you a flavor of it. The first part of it is to discover and understand how we consume. Because it's a multi-sided market, the person is a provider in this market. You provide personal data. We have what we call digital person zero, no resemblance to patient zero. These digital person zeros donate their body of data to science. They have full incursion into their house. Everything in the house is wired up to understand how you use everything, eat everything, including how you use toilet paper. And what we do is, by analyzing digital person zero, collecting data and ethnographic information, and getting different kinds of data from internet companies, we also put manufacturers' API product data onto the same platform. So all the products that you buy in supermarket, they have standardized inventory line items, weight, quantity. We put them on the market. We then create the blue layer is the head sink where all the data goes into. The green layer is the intelligent layer. We call it the noggin. Basically, that's the layer that we create. It's a composite data repository that links different sensor and different kinds of data so that you can personalize and exchange it with companies for personalized products and service. And to give you an example of what that means, I would know the temperature of this room. There will be a data point for that. I'd know the temperature in your car. I'll have a data point for that. I'll have a temperature for the office. We have all got these data. These are sensor data, easy to get. But the way we really want to think about data is the way how it can be useful for buying things. So it's not about the temperature in this room or the sensors. It's when I look at my diary in the morning and I look at and think about where I will be today. And this happens in the UK, not here, because you probably know all your temperatures here, right? If I go through the day, if I know all the temperatures of where I will be going today, what shall I wear? Now, to inform me on what I shall wear is not data alone, it's intelligence. It's an algorithm of putting together different kinds of data points to make sense to the human person for different kind of decision making. And more important, what could I buy? Based on this data applied to what kind of products. If I knew my nutrition and what I ate last week, what can I give to Tesco that they can personalize my grocery basket for next week so that it has got higher fiber content? These are the products and services we want to see in the future. And the hat is trying to make that future happen. And so, of course, the database architecture is very important, but the second part of the HAT project then looks at hypothesizing the different categories and the relationship between personal data and companies. It's to look at what kind of data I can give firms so that firms can personalize the products to the home. And that's all to do with interface design. I won't bore you with the details. It's quite a large project, and we've got quite a number of designers working in this space as well. In the third part of the project, we aim to create the market. We foresee 4 types of exchanges in this market. We foresee that there will be one exchanging personal data for aggregated intelligence. For example, I'd really like to know, in terms of my sugar intake, whether other women in this age and category is taking as much sugar as I am. Will I give my data away? Sure. If you tell me, I'll give it to you. I'd also like to know how much energy I'm using compared to that guy next door who seems to have this massive aircon on every day. Not that I'm going to get his data, but I'd like some aggregated intelligence, please. And so there could be different kinds of business model in that space. There is also business model around exchanging of personal data for recommendation. Nutrition advice. If I give you what I ate, will you give me something back? The exchange of personal data for personalized products, of course, is around grocery, as I said, but it also could be that if my medicine runs down, it triggers a reorder. Finally, the part that is really interesting, I mean, the fourth one is pretty standard, which is personalized campaign. That's the standard business model that you see today, which is the Facebook, Google, which is selling you ads, personalized campaign, recommendation engine. When is the next buy one, get one free? Sure, I can exchange my data on the consumption. You tell me what the best deals are. But that's not so interesting in our space. The one that's really disruptive and interesting is the bringing together the manufacturing sector and the internet sector. For example, if you were manufacturing WCs and toilets, and suddenly you built in a sensor, and now you can actually analyze stool and urine. Uh-oh. Wow. Are you going to derive revenues from it? Because suddenly you're playing in the health sector. So sudden An intelligent toilet can now derive revenues from a health industry. So we'd like to think that the hat is going to create the most disruptive platform known since www. And of course, that's exactly what we would like to do, because we have a huge manufacturing economy that has to move towards an internet economy in the UK. This is something that we have to do. These are some of our partners, GSK, mostly those who supply the household products. We're almost there in terms of getting the whole platform in order. Why are we looking at the market at home? It's 60% of the GDP. If even 1% of it can be converted from personal data, we're looking at a huge multiplier effect for future products and services, for future jobs, markets, employment opportunities in the UK. And of course, it is the Internet of Things. And Britain has sort of lost the internet, and we'd like to think that in the future, Internet of Things, we'd like to give the Americans a run for the money. And so for the Americans in the audience, game on. Scaling up, the idea of putting a hat into 1 million homes by next January. We are in partnership, I can't name names, some of the biggest companies in the internet world are in partnership and looking at this space very closely. We have a business model in terms of what kind, but our hat is probably a sort of Kindle model. You can have a hat that controls your house or whatever it is on your phone, but you can also actually have a hard hat at home. But if you want to know more about this project, please talk to me. A lot of what I said today can be covered in my book, and so this is a terrible, shameless plug of my book. Available in Kindle and PDF. And if you want the printed version, then you'll have to wait for February, because Cambridge University Press is about as fast as in printing as they are in printing the King James Bible back in the day. But thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Irene, for the talk. We now have some time for Q&A, so there are microphones actually along the center aisle. So if you have any questions, please make your way to the microphones, introduce yourself, and state your questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So Irene, thank you very much for the excellent talk. I thought I should just bring it to some sort of direct impact. So when is the first city-scale trial of the Hub of All Things taking place? And which city is this going to happen? If you can reveal the information.
Unfortunately, I can't. Right now, I can't. But it will be quite a big city. It's not London, but probably be the next one. The next as big one, right? And it doesn't take far from guessing. I mean, we're in the West Midlands after all, you know. But yes, it is, although in terms of scaling up that way, there is a preference actually to scale up to certain sectors. For example, in the health industry, we've got lots of requests for the hat to be placed for DP0s in, say, diabetes. And so you could, so the business model of the hat is, in terms of scaling, we're not so interested in the worldwide impact commercialization yet, but to be able to do some test runs around pockets of specific use on specific products, for example. Because otherwise, you know, it can go wrong very quickly, all right? And this is a business models of the future. And companies do take time to adjust to new business models. And potential disruption is huge. So we've also got companies who are very unhappy in this space. That's what disruption does, and this is a disruptive platform. But I'm very happy to share with you in private where we're going with this. Any other questions?
If not, let us please thank Professor Irene once again.